The Sea series. They inhabit the dark corners of your domain. While you may think there is only one, in reality, it is already an infestation. Coexistence is not possible, as they possess the power of flight. They can move wherever they fancy, despite your futile resistance. And should they ever make contact, then it's all over. First released in 2009's Ancient Prophecy, the Sea series are a group of purely Earth insect-type hand-trap monsters with escalating levels, the levels determined by the threat that they pose to a human in their artworks. In terms of their gameplay mechanics, typically you want to have one of these cards in your hands during your opponent's turn, so they can punish them in some way for relying too heavily on different forms of special summoning. This is because each sea is designed to be a pest to the opponent in some way. One example that comes to mind is Maxx. By discarding this card, every time your opponent special summons a monster, you can draw a card. And as we know, nowadays decks special summon a lot, so sometimes you can get a hand that ends up like this. But the question then becomes, what are these things? Well, the C in their name stands for cockroach. Yes. And as you've probably guessed, the shining lights you see in all of these card artworks is in fact the eyes of the cockroaches themselves, as they have invaded a person's home. Fun fact, by the way, in the Japanese, their name is actually G instead of C. This is because the Japanese word for cockroach is gokibori, and so the G is short for that. And interestingly, this shortening of the name from Gokibori to G fits in line with how the Japanese sometimes use G as a nickname for cockroaches, since, for some, the mere mention of their name can inspire fear. Now, the artworks of these cards depict a person trying his best to get rid of his infestation, and while obviously a cockroach isn't gonna instantly kill you at the mere touch, it is worth noting the World Health Organization does say that if a cockroach's saliva gets under your skin, say through a bite, you can actually become at risk of an infectious disease. So I guess the man's actions here are justifiable, I guess. Now, while you might think these monsters hidden in shadow would look like a typical cockroach, in the world of duel monsters, behind that shadowy miasma, it is actually revealed that their true form is that of Shiny Black Sea Squadder. Its flavor text reads, "Wherever there are shadows, you'll find the Sea Squad. Their hidden flying abilities let them confront the giants on equal terms." Yes, it appears the Sea Squad is in fact a race of tiny Kamen Rider-inspired insect people who see humans as their giant enemies. However, one piece of evidence that says otherwise is from the video game Reverse of Arcadia, as the silhouette for Shiny Black Sea appears to be that of a regular cockroach. So, I wonder, which is the true form, or are they separate entities? Now, Shiny Black Sea Squadder is the only one of this series to be a normal monster. However, since the Sea Squad are Sentai-esque creatures, then I guess it's only natural that when three of these guys come together, they can create a giant Megazord. This form is called Super Armored Robot Armed Black Iron Sea. Its effect is, if you control 3 insect monsters of the same name in your graveyard, you can target any number of them, special summon this card from your hand, then equip them to this card. You can send one monster equipped to this card to the graveyard, destroy all monsters your opponent controls with attack greater than or equal to the attack of the monster sent to the grave. So now let's move on to the actual hand trap seas, and let's see all the different ways that they can become a pest to your opponent. Shiny Black Sea. During either player's turn, when exactly one synchro monster is special summoned to your opponent's side of the field, you can banish this card from your graveyard to target that face-up synchro monster, destroy that target. Depicting the start of the sea story, we have here a lone cockroach. Its name of Shiny Black Sea alludes to the type of cockroach it is, which is a smoky brown cockroach, which is native to most parts in Japan. The smoky brown is a winged cockroach that likes to come into homes during the day, specifically to scavenge for food. Its body is a mix of black and brown, and it's very shiny, thus the name of Shiny Black Sea. You might have noticed that this monster's effect does not in fact activate from the hand, but instead from the grave. This is most likely because it is the weakest of all the sea cards. This is not just shown through its level and effect, but in fact by its artwork, as it's a single cockroach hiding beneath the cupboards. Essentially, the monster is coming from the grave, underneath the cupboards, up to the actual real world. Next up we have Maxx. During either player's turn, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard. This turn, each time your opponent special summons a monster, immediately draw one card. The most iconic of the sea cards, and argued to be one of the most powerful cards ever created for the Yu-Gi-Oh game. To start with, this monster's artwork depicts dozens of the cockroaches that have now swarmed into the person's home. This is fitting, as this monster's effect is essentially that every time the opponent special summons, you draw again, and again, and again. It's almost as if the cockroach itself is multiplying in the home. But some of you might be asking, why is this monster so broken in the card game? It seems like a good idea on paper. When you activate this card, you give your opponent a choice. Stop summoning so I don't draw any more cards, or take the Maxx challenge and make your board. However, you let me draw several cards for my next turn. A good idea in theory. However, this choice is in fact an illusion, since nowadays every deck usually needs to summon a lot to make a decent board. That wouldn't be a problem, but combine that with the fact that every deck is more or less capable of winning on their first turn. The truth of the matter is, you either end your turn with an open field and lose on your second turn, or you give your opponent all the cards they will need to completely demolish you on the next turn. Essentially, Maxx is a lose-lose situation, unless one or the other gets lucky or unlucky. As of the time of this video, Maxx is banned in the TCG. However, it's at 3 in the OCG. In Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, it's at 3. So, what are your opinions on Maxx? Should it be at 0, at 1, at 2, or 3? Let me know in the comment section below.
I buried those cockroaches!
Next up we have Flying Sea. When your opponent normal or special summons a monster, except during the damage step, you can special summon this card from your hand to the opponent's field in defense. The controller of this card cannot exceed summon. So Shiny Sea countered synchro summons, Maxx counters generic special summons, this guy counters Xyz summons. And what's fun about this card is that it depicts one of the cockroaches flying in the air. You can interpret this as, when you activate this card, Flying Sea flies over to your opponent's side of the field. And now that it's over there, the guy doesn't know what to do, and so he can't Xyz summon anymore. Next we have Confronting the Sea. When your opponent special summons a monster from the extra deck, you can special summon this card from your hand. If you do, this card is unaffected by monster effects that target this card. The artwork now depicts the human on the offensive. Paper swatter for offense in one hand and frying pan lid in the other for defense. Speaking of defense, actually, this card's high defense, in fact, the highest defense of any level 5 or lower insect type, alongside its immunity to targeting effects, makes it a difficult pest to deal with for the opponents, as they'll have to get rid of this to get to you. Retaliating Sea. During either player's turn, when your opponent activates a spell card that includes an effect that special summons a monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. If summoned this way, while this card is face up on the field, any card sent to the graveyard is banished instead. If this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can add one Earth Insect type monster with 1500 or less attack from your deck to your hand. This sea depicts the monster taking a stance against the human, and instead starts approaching him. The way this card is a pest to the opponent is that now every card that goes to the graveyard will be banished. If you're a combo heavy deck and you plan to use cards in the graveyard, that's a big problem. And that's not all this card does. The fact that when it's removed as well, you can add a new sea card straight to your hand, it's pretty cool. For me, not for the opponent. And finally we have Contact Sea. When your opponent normal or special summons a monster, you can special summon this card from your hand to the opponent's field in defense position. This card's controller cannot fusion, synchro, Xyz, or link summon, unless they use this card as a material. The final card in the story of the sea. The monster has now made contact, and as such, has won the battle for dominance. Essentially, the cockroach has flown over to the opponent's side of the field and landed on him. The opponent in a duel is now frozen in fear as they are unable to summon any monsters from the extra deck unless they use the cockroach. And with that, that's the Sea series done. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Catch you later.